I was transmigrated into a novel. To survive, I was forced to become the special assistant to the unhinged villainess, Isabella Rossi. Her first assignment for me was to steal corporate secrets from the protagonist, Damian Sterling, and she threatened me. Fail, and you'll face the consequences. Using my knowledge of the original plot, I turned one of the hero's own moles and helped her win the bid. But instead, she cornered me in her villa, her eyes glinting with danger. "Who are you really?" she asked. "Tell me the truth, or you can be my dog." I said, "Woof. Check your brain at the door. Don't overthink the logic. Just enjoy the ride. My name is Ethan Cole, the Seawelly kind. Occupation: administrative assistant at a company on the verge of bankruptcy. My special skill is having mastered the 36 classic postures of slacking off at the office. My current identity is a cannon fodder character with the same name in a trashy power fantasy novel called The Concrete Dragon's Return. A character who doesn't even survive past the 3rd chapter. In his mind, a flat, emotionless electronic voice only he could hear was delivering its final broadcast. Identity information confirmed. Survival system activated. Sole function: danger assessment. When a main plot character approaches, the system will issue a warning. Warning levels are divided into green, yellow, red, and black. We wish you a pleasant life. Pleasant? Pleasant my ass. Ethan lay on the rock-hard bed in his studio apartment, staring at the ugly fluorescent light on the ceiling, wanting to cry, but having no tears left. He'd been ice-guyed into a book. Just yesterday, he'd been slacking off at work, complaining about this brain-dead novel. The next second, everything went dark, and he became this minor nuisance in the book who tries to suck up to the heroine by provoking the hero, only to get slapped into a wall so hard they couldn't even scrape him off. His death was casual, cruel, and utterly pointless. Thank God the plot hasn't started yet. Ethan sat up with a jolt, his expression hardening with resolve. He was just an ordinary corporate drone in his last life with no great ambitions. Now that he had a second chance, he had no intention of dying young. Since he knew the plot, his survival guide could be summed up in one phrase: keep his head down. Heroes, heroines, supervillains, they could all stay the hell away from him. If he could just dodge all the plot points and live quietly as a background character, he could definitely make it to the finale. System: report my current security status. Ethan thought. Beep. No main plot characters within a 3-mile radius. Security level: green. Host may continue to slack off with confidence. Perfect. Ethan snapped his fingers, his mood instantly improving. His cannon fodder persona worked at an ad agency called Astra Advertising, and the owner of this company was one of the early-stage malicious female side characters, the first minor boss the protagonist was destined to humiliate. According to the plot, in 3 days, the hero, Damian Sterling, would descend upon the company and begin his triumphant tour of putting everyone in their place. So, I have to quit and get the hell out of here within 3 days. Ethan immediately started rummaging through his apartment for a pen and paper, preparing to write a resignation letter of world-shaking proportions. Just then his phone rang. The caller ID read, Peterson the slave driver. It was the contact name the original Ethan had saved for his department manager. Ethan's eyelid twitched as a sense of foreboding washed over him. Hello, Mr. Peterson. Ethan, get down to the Velvet Curtain Club right now. The Celestial Suite. The company just closed a huge deal. I need you to come over and get the contract signed. On the other end, Mr. Peterson's voice was filled with unrestrained excitement and a hint of sycophancy. Ethan froze. The Velvet Curtain? The Celestial Suite? Why did that sound so familiar? He quickly racked his brain, trying to recall the plot, and the next second, every hair on his body stood on end. Wasn't this the classic scene from the book where the biggest, most psychotic villain of them all, Isabella Rossi, entertained her business rivals? The so-called Queen of Commerce, who was in reality a ruthless, possessive monster who treated the protagonist like her personal property, only to be brought down by an alliance of powerful families, ending in total ruin? What was she doing here? This wasn't how the plot was supposed to go. Warning. Warning. Black. Level threat detected approaching. Host must evacuate immediately. Evacuate immediately. The alarm in his head was so shrill it felt like it would pierce his eardrums. Mr. Peterson, I have a stomachache, acute gastroenteritis. I can't make it. Ethan blurted out without a second thought. Bullshit. If this deal gets signed, the whole company gets a bonus. You get your ass over here now. That's an order. Beep. 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 The line went dead. Ethan clutched his phone, his palms slick with cold sweat. To go or not to go? go, and he'd come face to face with the ultimate black-level villainess. A 99% chance of death. Don't go, and he'd piss off Peterson, the slave driver, lose his job for sure, but he'd get to keep his life. Was this even a choice? Only an idiot would go. Ethan decisively silenced his phone, tossed it on the bed, and prepared to continue writing his resignation letter. But just as he picked up the pen, he froze. He remembered. The original novel mentioned offhandedly that this cannon fodder Ethan had a sister who was in long-term hospital care, and the medical bills were astronomical. He lunged for the nightstand, yanked open the drawer, and sure enough, there was a medical bill. The number of zeros in the total amount made his head spin. Fuck! Ethan slammed his fist on the table. He really couldn't lose this job. Fortune favors the bold. No, survival favors the bold. Ethan gritted his teeth and decided to go. It was just delivering a contract, right? He'd drop it off and leave, not saying a single word. It should be fine. After all, he was a nobody right now. A big shot like her would never even notice him. Clinging to this sliver of hope, Ethan changed his clothes and hurriedly hailed an Uber to the Velvet Curtain. The club was a monument to gaudy luxury. Following the directions from Peterson, Ethan navigated the place with his heart pounding and arrived outside the celestial suite. He took a deep breath, straightened his collar, and was just about to knock. Creak! The door suddenly opened a crack from the inside. A thick wave of blood mixed with perfume assaulted his senses. Ethan froze instantly. Through the crack in the door, he saw a man, his face covered in blood, lying motionless on the plush carpet. And next to the man, a woman in a tight black dress was slowly, elegantly, wiping blood from her fingertips with a pristine white silk handkerchief. The woman had her back to the door. Her figure was stunning, her wavy, jet-black hair cascading down her waist. Her silhouette alone radiated a fatal combination of danger and allure. She was, without a doubt, Isabella Rossi. Ethan's mind went completely blank. Warning, you have entered a black hazard zone. Host survival probability is less than 1%. Immediate cremation is advised. Even the system's voice had changed pitch. Run. That was the only thought in Ethan's head. He didn't even dare to breathe as he stiffly, slowly, began to turn around, preparing to bolt. But the moment he turned, since you're already here, why not come in and have a seat? A cool, playful voice drifted from behind him. Ethan's body turned to stone. He could feel a gaze as cold and tangible as ice lock onto the back of his neck. It was over. Game over. That was the only thought left in Ethan's mind. He felt his neck creak like a rusty gear as he turned back, inch by painful inch. At the door, the woman in the black dress had turned to face him. A face so beautiful it was breathtaking, yet so cold it sent a chill through his heart. Met his eyes. Delicate eyebrows, seductive eyes, a perfectly straight nose, and below it, lips as red as fire. Her features were as exquisite as a masterpiece sculpted by God, but her eyes were bottomless pits, capable of sucking in a person's very soul. Right now, she was looking at him with a ghost of a smile, her expression filled with the predatory amusement of a cat playing with a mouse. Hello. I'm from Astra Advertising. I'm here to deliver the contract. Ethan managed a smile that was uglier than a grimace, holding up the document folder with both hands to show he was harmless. Isabella's gaze lingered on his face for 2 seconds before slowly moving down to the folder in his hands. Finally, she casually glanced at the unconscious man on the floor. Oh, delivering a contract, she purred, her red lips parting slightly. Somehow, I get the feeling you're here to watch the show. No, absolutely not. Ethan shook his head so hard it was a blur. I just got here. I didn't see anything. I swear, I'm just a delivery guy. To add credibility, he even held up 3 fingers, his face a mask of sincerity. Seeing his pathetic state, the amusement in Isabella's eyes deepened. She didn't speak, but instead began to walk towards him, her 4-inch stilettos clicking on the marble floor. Click, clack, click. The sound of her heels was like the drumbeat of death, each step landing precisely on Ethan's heart. He felt an invisible pressure bearing down on him, making it difficult to even breathe. This woman's presence was overpowering, 100 times more terrifying than the book described. Finally, Isabella stopped in front of him. A cool, floral scent, tinged with the faint smell of blood, filled his nostrils. Ethan instinctively held his breath, staring at the floor, trying to shrink himself into a ball and minimize his presence. Look up, Isabella commanded. Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second before resigning himself to his fate and lifting his head. He didn't dare meet her eyes. his gaze landing on her exquisite collarbone instead. Isabella extended a long, slender finger and gently lifted his chin, forcing him to meet her gaze. Her fingertip was cold as ice. "Tell me, what did you see?" Her voice was soft and gentle, like a lover's whisper, but it made Ethan's scalp tingle with fear. System alert. Host's heart rate has exceeded 180 BPM, triggering risk of cardiac arrest. System alert. Host's sphincter muscle is showing signs of imminent failure. Please prepare for cleanup. I really didn't see anything. Ethan was on the verge of tears. "Ma'am, miss, listen. I'm just a working stiff. I've got aging parents and young kids to feed. The whole family depends on me. Please, just do me a favor. Treat me like a fart in the wind and let me go." Isabella suddenly laughed. Her laugh was like a thawing glacier, like 1,000 flowers blooming at once, brightening the entire room. But Ethan only felt colder. "You're an interesting one," Isabella said, retracting her hand. She took the document folder from him and flipped through it casually. "Astra Advertising? You work for Peterson?" Yes, Mr. Peterson is my manager." Ethan nodded like a bobblehead. "All right, I've got the contract. You can get lost now," Isabella said dismissively, turning to walk toward the sofa inside the suite. Get lost? Ethan could hardly believe his ears. She was just letting him go. The sudden reprieve felt so unreal, he wondered if he was dreaming. Thank you, ma'am. I wish you a long and prosperous life." Ethan stammered, overwhelmed with gratitude. He backed away, practically scrambling to get out the door. He swore he'd never run so fast in his entire life. However, just as his hand was about to touch the doorknob, "Stop!" Isabella's voice rang out again. For the third time, Ethan's body turned to stone. He turned back stiffly, his face a mask of despair. "Lady, are you messing with me?" He saw Isabella lounging on the sofa, one long, slender leg crossed over the other. She held a glass of red wine, swirling it gently. "Come here," she said, pointing to the spot next to her with her chin. Ethan's knees felt weak. He shuffled over, feeling not like he was walking to a sofa, but to the gallows. "Sit." Ethan didn't dare disobey. He perched on the very edge of the cushion, using only half his butt, his body as tense as a wire about to snap. Isabella took a sip of wine, her gaze fixed on him. "What's your name?" she asked. Ethan Cole. Ethan Cole." Isabella repeated the name, a strange light flashing in her eyes. "Aren't you curious who that man on the floor is?" Ethan nearly jumped off the sofa. "Curious?" "Curiosity killed the cat, lady. Not curious. Not all." He shook his head frantically. "I've never been a curious person. Not since I was a kid, seriously." "Is that so?" Isabella chuckled, setting down her wine glass. She leaned forward slightly, getting closer to his ear. A warm, wine-scented breath washed over his skin, making Ethan's body go rigid. He heard her whisper in a seductive voice. "His name is Chad Wagner. He's the vice president of Apex Consolidated. And I just castrated him. Now, aren't you curious why I did that?" Ethan's pupils contracted to pinpricks. Apex Consolidated. Wasn't that the first family-run corporation the protagonist, Damian Sterling, targeted after his return to the city? And this Chad Wagner was the brother-in-law of Apex's chairman, a classic rich boy parasite who used his brother-in-law's power to do whatever he wanted. He was the first major cannon fodder character the hero was supposed to crush under his heel. According to the original plot, tonight, Chad was supposed to try and assault some starlet in this room, only to be stopped by the timely arrival of Damian Sterling. Damian would save the damsel in distress, break both of Chad's legs, and fire the opening shot of his glorious return. But now, the starlet was gone. The hero hadn't shown up, and instead the psycho villainess Isabella Rossi had gotten here first and taken the man's third leg. This plot. It was completely off the rails. System alert. Plotline has experienced an unknown deviation. Risk factor recalculation in progress. Recalculation failed. Host is advised to pray. Ethan felt as if an invisible hand was squeezing his throat, preventing him from speaking. He wasn't just curious now. He was terrified. What was this woman planning? Why was she telling him all this? Was this some standard procedure before she killed him to silence him? "What cat got your tongue?" Isabella straightened up, calmly observing his panicked expression, seeming to enjoy the feeling of having complete control. "And no, I wouldn't dare." Ethan swallowed hard, his mind racing to find an escape route. An idea, a flash of inspiration hit him. He suddenly looked up at Isabella, his face a mask of pure admiration. "Ma'am, you must be an agent of justice. This Chad Wagner guy, you can tell he's no good just by looking at him. What you did was a service to the public. I admire you. I admire you from the bottom of my heart." As he spoke, he gave her a big thumbs up, his expression so sincere he almost believed it himself. Isabella was taken aback by his sudden ass-kissing, then raised an eyebrow with amusement. "Oh, and how do you know he's no good? It's written all over his face." Ethan began spouting nonsense with a straight face. "Look at him. Dark aura, shifty eyes. It's the classic face of a lecher doomed to a short life. Scum like him are a waste of air. By taking him out, you've performed a great service to humanity." After his speech, he cautiously added, "Of course, I didn't see anything. The moment I walk out that door, I'm a mute." Isabella stared at him for a long moment, the smile in her eyes growing wider. She was discovering that this little man, Ethan Cole, was far more interesting than she'd thought. Cowardly as a mouse, yet able to maintain a sliver of clarity in a desperate situation, and even find the energy to flatter her. Just as she was about to tease her interesting little mouse a bit more, bang! The suite door was violently kicked open from the outside. A tall, handsome man with a cold expression and an aura of 7 parts arrogance and 3 parts defiance strode in. He scanned the room, his brow furrowing when he saw Chad Wagner on the floor. Finally, his sharp gaze locked onto Isabella on the sofa. "Isabella, you again." The man's voice was deep and magnetic, carrying an authority that could not be questioned. The moment Ethan saw him, the alarm in his head didn't just ring. It went into a full-blown air raid siren. "Warning! Warning! Red, level threat detected. Protagonist Damian Sterling has appeared. Host must take evasive action immediately." Immediately. Ethan was so scared he almost died on the spot. One psycho Villainess was more than he could handle, and now the God King protagonist shows up? This was a clash of titans, and he was the mortal about to be obliterated in the crossfire. He wished he could dig a hole and bury himself. Seeing Damian, the smile on Isabella's face vanished, replaced by an icy frost. "Damian, since when do you have the right to interfere in my business?" "Chad is my man. You touch him, you disrespect me," Damian said coldly. "Your man." Isabella let out a derisive snort, as if she'd just heard the world's funniest joke. "Just a dog. Is he really worth you standing up for him?" The tension between them crackled, the air thick with unspoken hostility. Ethan shrank into the corner of the sofa, trying to will himself into becoming invisible. Don't look at me, just carry on, pretend I'm not here." However, Damian's gaze inevitably fell upon him. It was sharp as a knife, filled with scrutiny and suspicion. "Who is he?" Damian asked, frowning. Ethan's heart leaped in his throat. Here it comes, the multiple-choice question of death. Isabella glanced at the trembling Ethan beside her, a wicked smile suddenly playing on her lips. She wrapped a slender arm around his neck, pulling him close. Her red lips brushed against his ear as she whispered, her breath warm. "Him. He's my new pet." Boom! Ethan felt his brain shut down. "Lady, you can't do this to me." With that one sentence, you just put me at the top of the protagonist's hit list. Sure enough, Damian's face darkened to a thunderous black, and the look he gave Ethan was now filled with undisguised murderous intent. "New pet," Damian sneered. "Isabella, your taste is as cheap as ever." At that critical moment, everything changed. A flurry of footsteps and shouting echoed from outside the suite. "It's Apex's men. Quick, surround the place. Don't let them escape." Isabella and Damian's expressions shifted simultaneously. Neither had expected the other to have called for backup. "Come with me." Isabella shot to her feet, grabbing Ethan's wrist and dragging him toward a room on the far side of the suite. It was a massive walk-in closet. Isabella pulled him inside, her eyes scanning the space before locking onto a large, solid wood wardrobe. She threw the door open, shoved Ethan inside, and then slipped in after him. With a soft thud, the door closed, plunging the world into darkness and silence. Ethan was pressed hard against the inner wall of the wardrobe by Isabella, his senses filled with the unique scent of her perfume mingled with blood. In the darkness, he could feel the softness of her body against his, could even hear the steady beat of her heart. Her warm breath ghosted across his neck, sending shivers down his spine. Ethan stood as still as a corpse, not daring to move a muscle. System alert. Host is in physical contact with a black-level threat. Danger assessment has gone off the charts. System recommends suicide as a less painful alternative. Shut up. Ethan roared internally. What was this useless system good for besides snarky comments? He could feel Isabella's body was also tense, like a fully drawn bow. Clearly, The situation outside was serious enough to concern even her. Soon, the door to the walk-in closet opened, and the sounds of chaotic footsteps and voices flooded in. Search. Check every corner. The boss said we have to find that bitch today. It was Apex Consolidated's men. Ethan's heart leaped into his throat. If they were found, he and Isabella would be chopped into pieces. He was sweating, and he instinctively tried to shift his position to get more comfortable. But as soon as he moved, an icy hand clamped around his neck. Don't move, Isabella's voice, sharp as a shard of ice, whispered right next to his ear. Move again, and I'll kill you right now. Her voice was laced with pure, undisguised killing intent. Ethan immediately went still. He could feel her sharp nails digging slightly into his skin. The footsteps moved back and forth in the closet, accompanied by the sounds of clothes being thrown around. Ethan's heart was in his throat, rising and falling with every sound. Each time the footsteps neared the wardrobe, his heart skipped a beat. Time seemed to stretch on for an eternity. After what felt like a lifetime, a voice spoke up just outside the wardrobe door. Boss, we've searched this area. No one's here. All right, check the other rooms. The footsteps gradually faded away, and the walk-in closet returned to silence. Ethan's frayed nerves finally relaxed a little. They were safe. However, the hand on his neck didn't loosen its grip. Are they gone? Ethan asked in a tiny whisper. Shut up. Isabella's voice was still ice-cold. Ethan didn't dare speak again, forced to remain in his incredibly uncomfortable position. After a few more minutes, the outside fell completely silent. Only then did Isabella release her hand. Finally free, Ethan greedily sucked in air, feeling like he'd just been pulled from underwater. Just as he thought the crisis was over and was about to push the wardrobe door open. Creak! The door to the walk-in closet opened again. A single set of footsteps walked in, slow and deliberate. Ethan's heart shot back into his throat. Had Apex's men come back? But the voice that followed plunged him into an icy abyss. Come on out. I know you're in there. It was Damian Sterling. He hadn't left. Ethan instinctively glanced at Isabella. In the dark, he couldn't see her expression, but he could feel that her entire aura had become even more dangerous than before. TSK. Isabella let out an annoyed sigh. It seemed even she hadn't expected Damian to be this persistent. Isabella, hand him over, and I can pretend none of this ever happened. Damian's voice called from outside, carrying an unmistakable tone of command. Hand him over? Isabella suddenly laughed, the sound echoing eerily in the small space. Damian, what makes you think you're in any position to negotiate with me? As she spoke, her body suddenly moved. Ethan felt a powerful force shove him off balance, his back slamming hard against the wardrobe door with a dull thud. Bang! The wardrobe door flew open. Blinding light flooded in, making Ethan, who had been in darkness for so long, instinctively squint. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Damian Sterling standing just a few feet away, staring at them with an expression of absolute coldness. And he himself was being held by Isabella in an extremely intimate pose, her arms wrapped around him. One of her hands rested provocatively on his shoulder, her red lips curved into a wicked, taunting smile. See? My new pet. Isn't he cute? She said, looking straight at Damian. Too bad he's mine. You can't touch him. The system was completely silent. Hey, system? You dead? Make a sound. Beep. Host is currently in a confined space with a black level threat. Probability of escape is 0. System once again advises. Host should give up struggling and enjoy the final moments of his life. Enjoy your damn self. Ethan was so angry he almost cursed out loud. This stupid system was completely useless. Looks like he was on his own. His eyes darted around as he began to formulate an escape plan. Jump out of the car? No, at this speed, he'd be a smear on the pavement. Fake an illness? He'd already used that excuse. It wouldn't work again. What then? Just as he was racking his brain, Isabella's phone rang. She put on a Bluetooth earpiece and answered the call. Hello. Yes, I know. Clean it up properly. Don't leave any loose ends. Her voice was flat, but the content of her words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. Clean it up? Clean up who? It couldn't be that Chad Wagner guy on the floor, could it? After hanging up, Isabella suddenly turned to look at him. Where do you live? Huh. The abrupt question caught Ethan completely off guard. I asked you where you live, Isabella repeated, a hint of impatience in her tone. Oh, Sunnyside Apartments in West Ethelberg, Ethan answered honestly. His mind was racing. Why was she asking for his address? Was she planning on driving him home? No, that didn't fit her character. It was more likely she wanted to go to his home and clean up his entire family. At that thought, another wave of cold sweat broke out on his brow. Isabella said nothing more, just punched the address in her navigation system and slammed her foot on the accelerator. The sports car roared to life again, speeding toward the west side of the city like a bullet. The rest of the drive was pure agony for Ethan. One moment, he was convinced she was taking him to some deserted field to bury him. The next, he was terrified she was actually going to his apartment. His mind played out 80 different ways he could die. Thankfully, Isabella eventually pulled the car over in front of the Sunnyside Apartments. It was an old, run-down complex, a stark contrast to the multi-million-dollar car parked before it. "Get out," Isabella said curtly. "Oh, right." Granted a pardon, Ethan fumbled with his seatbelt and scrambled out of the car as if escaping a fire. Ms. Rossi, thank you for tonight. Goodbye." He stood outside the car, gave her a bow, and turned to run. "Wait," Isabella's voice, like a magic spell, froze him in place once more. Ethan turned back, on the verge of tears. "Lady, are you ever going to be done with me?" Isabella got out of the car. She leaned against the door, pulled a slim cigarette from an exquisite purse, and lit it. The crimson glow flickered in the night, illuminating her beautiful and dangerous face. She took a drag and exhaled slowly, her eyes looking somewhat hazy through the smoke. "Ethan Cole." "Here." Ethan instinctively stood at attention. "Starting tomorrow, you don't need to go to Astra advertising anymore," Isabella said coolly. Ethan's heart sank. Well, this was it. She was firing him. Without a job, how would he pay for his sister's medical bills? "Ms. Rossi," he began to plead, but Isabella cut him off. "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, come find me at the Rossi Enterprises headquarters. Top floor." With that, she extinguished her cigarette, got back in the car, and sped off, leaving a stunned Ethan and the lingering scent of tobacco in the air. Rossi Enterprises? Wasn't that her own company? One of the biggest corporate empires in Ethelberg, if not the entire country. She wanted to go find her? What did that mean? Ethan stood there, completely baffled. A cold breeze blew past, and he shivered, snapping back to reality. Whatever she meant, he just wouldn't go. Problem solved. He didn't want to have anything to do with that crazy woman for another second. His mind made up, Ethan sprinted back to his rental apartment, triple locking the door before he felt even a sliver of security. He collapsed onto his bed, replaying the night's events. It felt like a nightmare. "No, I can't stay in Ethelberg." Ethan sat up abruptly, his eyes filled with determination. This place was a meat grinder, crawling with protagonists and villains. If he stayed any longer, he'd be turned into paste. He immediately opened his phone and started searching for late-night bus tickets out of the city. Got one. A Greyhound bus leaving for the next state at 3 a.m. That's the one. Ethan booked the ticket without hesitation and started packing his meager belongings. A few changes of clothes, a power bank, and the few $1,000s in cash he had to his name, which he kept in a drawer. Half an hour later, wearing a mask and a hat, he slipped out of his apartment complex like a thief in the night, a backpack slung over his shoulder. He stood on the sidewalk and looked back at the place he'd lived for a year without a shred of sentimentality. Good riddance. He flagged down a taxi and headed straight for the bus station. Sitting in the terminal's waiting area, Ethan's emotions were on a roller coaster. From terror to despair and now, a touch of post-disaster relief. He looked at the missed calls from Mr. Peterson lighting up his phone, sneered, and blocked the number. To hell with the job, to hell with the medical bills. His life came first. You can always earn more money, but you only get one life. Finally, the boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Ethan let out a long sigh of relief, grabbed his backpack, and joined a stream of people heading for the gate. Freedom was just steps away. However, just as he was about to pass through the gate, two towering, broad-shouldered men in black suits appeared like iron walls, blocking his path from either side. "Mr. Cole, our boss would like to have a word with you," one of the men said, his face devoid of expression. Ethan's heart plummeted to the bottom of his stomach. He stiffly raised his head and followed the man's gaze. Not far away, standing at the entrance of the VIP lounge, was the woman who had been haunting his dreams. No, his nightmares. She had changed into a sharp white pantsuit, her long hair tied back in a high ponytail. Her hands were tucked in her pockets, and she was watching him with an ice-cold stare. As if to say, "What do you think you're running?" "Willing. Of course I'm willing," Ethan blurted out, bowing and scraping. "To be able to work for Ms. Rossi is the honor of a lifetime." "Are you kidding me?" Did he dare say no at a time like this? "Very good." Isabella nodded, satisfied. "Let's go. Time for work." With that, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the polished floor. Ethan followed behind like a little errand boy, his mind a stampede of 1,000 screaming alpacas. Work? Work your ass. I just want to clock out. No, wait, I just want to run away. The Rossi Enterprises headquarters. It was a towering skyscraper in the heart of Ethelberg's bustling central business district, a symbol of immense power. Following Isabella, Ethan walked into the magnificent lobby, feeling like a country bumpkin on his first trip to the big city. Along the way, every employee who saw Isabella stopped in their tracks, bowed a full 90 degrees, and didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. And Ethan, trailing behind her, became the target of countless curious, probing, and even envious stares. He felt so uncomfortable he could only stare at the floor, pretending to be invisible. The elevator shot straight to the top floor, which was entirely Isabella's exclusive domain. The level of luxury was comparable to a palace. Your desk is out here, Isabella said, pointing to a spot right outside her office door. From now on, you're not to leave this floor without my permission. Ethan was speechless. This wasn't a special assistant. This was a prisoner doing office time. Also, this is your first assignment. Isabella tossed him a tablet. Apex Consolidated is bidding on that parcel of land in the South End. I don't care how you do it, but within 3 days, I want to see all of their bidding prices and their entire proposal. Ethan stared at the task on the tablet, completely stunned. Holy crap. Corporate espionage? That was a felony. And Apex Consolidated was the hero Damian Sterling's territory. Trying to steal something from there was like trying to pull a tooth from Tiger's mouth. This woman was truly malicious. She was trying to get him killed. MMS. Rossi this. I'm just an admin. I don't know how to do this sort of thing. Ethan said, his face troubled. I don't want to hear about the process. I only want results. Isabella cut him off coldly. If you can't do it, you'll face the consequences. With that, she turned and walked into her office, shutting the door with a loud bang. Ethan stood there, holding the tablet that felt like a hot potato, utterly lost. System alert. Host has accepted a high-risk mission. Mission failure will trigger the vaporize from existence ending. Mission success may also trigger the vaporize from existence ending. System conclusion. Host is screwed. Prepare for death. Signing off. My fate is my own to control. Ethan retorted to the system through gritted teeth. He sat down at the desk, which was bigger than the bed in his rental, staring at the tablet, feeling a massive headache coming on. Steal Apex Consolidated's corporate secrets? He might as well try to steal nuclear launch codes from military base. He was just a regular guy with no special skills. How could he possibly complete such a mission? Calm down, calm down. Ethan forced himself to think, analyzing the situation. Isabella, giving him this task, was clearly a setup. It could be a test, or it could be a way to use Damian Sterling to get rid of him. Therefore, he had to complete this mission, but he couldn't complete it too well. He needed to find a way to deliver the goods, while also distancing himself from the crime, and ideally, get Isabella and Damian to go at each other's throats. Suddenly, Ethan's eyes lit up. He thought of someone, a key character from the original novel, the Inside Man. According to the plot, there was an executive within Apex Consolidated named Rick Wagner, the younger brother of Chad Wagner, the guy who had just been castrated. This Rick had always been jealous of his brother's position and had secretly collaborated with several rival companies. He was a classic turncoat. In the later stages of the novel, the protagonist Damian had used Rick's crimes as leverage to turn him into a key pawn in bringing down Apex. But right now, the plot was just beginning. Damian hadn't even noticed this little snake yet. This was his chance. Hiv. Ethan let out a villainous laugh and immediately set his plan in motion. He used the company's internal network to create an anonymous email account and sent a message to Rick Wagner. The email was simple, just one sentence. Want to replace your brother? Want to become the VP of Apex? I know all your secrets. After sending the email, Ethan closed his laptop and began his workday of masterful slacking. He was confident that an ambitious and guilty man like Rick would not be able to sit still after seeing that email. Sure enough, the next morning, he received a reply. Who are you? What do you want? Ethan smiled. The fish had taken the bait. He didn't reply directly, choosing to string him along, occasionally sending bits of incriminating information that only Rick would know. Things like how he was using embezzled funds to support 3 mistresses, or how he was secretly transferring company assets. All information mentioned in the original novel. Using it now was like bringing a gun to a knife fight. Rick completely panicked. He sent a flood of emails, his tone shifting from threats to begging, and finally, to pure terror. What do you want from me? Just tell me, I'll do anything you ask. The time is right. Ethan typed out his final message. The bidding proposal and final price for the South End land deal. In my inbox by midnight tonight. Otherwise, all of this information will be on your brother-in-law's desk tomorrow morning. With that done, Ethan let out a long breath, feeling as if he'd just fought a war. All that was left was to wait. 11:58 p.m. Ethan's inbox received an encrypted file. He used the password Rick had provided in an email and successfully opened it. Inside was every single detail of Apex Consolidated's plan for the South End project. Success! Ethan was so excited he almost jumped out of his chair. He hadn't expected it to be so easy. He immediately forwarded the file to Isabella. A minute later, his office door opened. Isabella walked out, holding her phone. Her face betrayed a hint of surprise and curiosity that she couldn't quite hide. She walked over to Ethan's desk and looked down at him. "How did you do it?" "That is a trade secret," Ethan said with a mysterious smile. No way was he going to tell her. Isabella gave him a long, hard look, but didn't press the issue. "Very good," she nodded. "You did very well." It was the first time she had ever directly praised him. "Starting today, your salary is multiplied by 10. Ethan's eyes went wide. Multiplied by 10. His current monthly salary was $3,000. 10 times that was $30,000 a month. $360,000 a year. Holy crap. The sudden windfall made him feel a little dizzy. Also, Isabella's tone shifted, her eyes taking on a meaningful glint. "Tomorrow, you're coming with me to the auction for the South End project." "Huh?" Ethan's smile froze on his face. "Is there a problem?" "And no problem." Tears were streaming down Ethan's face internally. He felt like he had been completely snared by this demoness. He thought his clever move would keep him out of the line of fire, but now Isabella was dragging him onto the battlefield to go head-to-head with the protagonist, Damian Sterling. He had seriously screwed up this time. He looked every bit the confident victor, raising his bid each time with an air of casual indifference. Soon, the price had soared to an astonishing figure. In the entire hall, only Apex Consolidated and Rossi Enterprises were still in the running. All eyes were on Damian and Isabella. "100 million, Damian said, raising his paddle. Isabella glanced at Ethan beside her. Ethan immediately understood, leaned in, and whispered a number in her ear. It was the final psychological price limit he had gotten from Rick Wagner. After hearing it, a victorious smile spread across Isabella's lips. She raised her paddle. 100 million and $1,000. The room erupted in murmurs. In an auction of this caliber, bids were increased by millions or even tens of millions. For Isabella, to add a mere $1,000 was a blatant, calculated insult. Damian's face turned ashen. He glared at Isabella, then at Ethan beside her, the cold fury in his eyes sharp enough to freeze them both solid. He knew his hand had been revealed, and the one who had leaked, it was very likely this insignificant little man right in front of him. 110 million, Damian gritted out, raising his paddle again. This price was already over their budget. 110 million and $1,000, Isabella followed coolly. She was like a seasoned hunter toying with prey that had already fallen into her trap. Damian's fist clenched so tightly his knuckles cracked. He knew there was no point in continuing. He took a deep breath and lowered his paddle. Bang! The auctioneer's gavel fell. Congratulations to Rossi Enterprises on successfully acquiring the South End property. The room burst into thunderous applause. Isabella rose to her feet, a triumphant queen basking in the spotlight. She led Ethan right past Damian. Better luck next time, she said softly. On the way back, the atmosphere in the car was strange. Ethan had assumed that after such a major victory, Isabella would be in high spirits. But she was silent, focused only on driving. The car didn't return to the office. Instead, it pulled into a riverside villa complex. This was Isabella's private residence. As she led him into the villa, Ethan's heart pounded. What was this woman up to now? Was she planning to silence him for good? After all, he knew far too many of her secrets. Sit, Isabella said, pointing to the living room sofa. She went to the bar and poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handing one to Ethan. He didn't dare refuse and took it with trembling hands. Who are you, really? Isabella sat across from him, her gaze as sharp as a scalpel, piercing straight into his soul. Ethan's heart dropped. Here it was. The final judgment had finally come. I'm just Ethan Cole, he stammered, making one last desperate attempt. Wrong. Isabella shook her head, her eyes becoming fiercely predatory. An ordinary administrative assistant couldn't possibly get his hands on Apex Consolidated's core secrets in 2 days. and an ordinary man wouldn't be able to remain so calm under Damien Sterling's pressure. She closed in on him step by step, backing him into a corner of the sofa. "You have a secret," she purred, her hand reaching out to caress his cheek, her voice dripping with seduction. "Tell me, what is your secret?" Or, her body was almost pressed against his, her red lips whispering a fatal temptation next to his ear. "Be my dog, and I'll help you keep it." "Be your dog." The words seared into Ethan's pride like a branding iron. His body trembled with a mixture of anger and humiliation. A man can be killed, but not shamed. In his past life, he may have been a corporate drone, but he had his limits. He was about to deliver a righteous refusal, but the words died in his throat. He saw the cold, emotionless, killing intent in her eyes. He had no doubt that if he said the word no, the next second he would become a cold corpse at the bottom of the river outside. A wise man knows when to yield. As long as there is life, there is hope. Ethan quickly repeated these mantras to himself, and then his face instantly broke into a fawning smile. "Woof!" He even barked, quite convincingly. Isabella was speechless. Even a queen like her, who had seen it all, was thrown off by Ethan's sudden and shameless maneuver. The icy mask on her face cracked, and the corner of her mouth twitched uncontrollably. "Ms. Rossi, what do you think? Was my bark up to standard?" Ethan asked, looking at her expectantly. "I could do a backflip for you, if you'd like." "Shut up." Isabella felt her blood pressure rising. She realized she had underestimated the depths of this man's shamelessness. She pulled her hand back, returned to her seat, and rubbed her temples. The interrogative atmosphere she had so carefully crafted had been completely shattered by Ethan's antics. "Get out," she said, waving a dismissive hand, clearly annoyed. "Right away." Granted a pardon, Ethan scrambled out of the villa. Standing in the cold riverside wind, he felt alive again. He had truly just walked through the gates of hell and back. He glanced back at the brightly lit villa, his expression complicated. This woman, Isabella, was even more terrifying than he had imagined. She was not only ruthless, but also incredibly sharp and perceptive. In front of her, he felt completely transparent. If he stayed by her side, he would be played to death sooner or later. "No, I have to find a way to get away from her for good." Ethan's eyes hardened with resolve once more. He knew that a conventional escape was useless. This woman's influence spread across the entire city. He needed a reason that would make it impossible for her to control him, a reason that would force her to let him go. But what could that be? As he walked, Ethan racked his brain, replaying the entire plot of the novel in his mind, searching for a breakthrough. Suddenly, he stopped. He remembered a detail that was mentioned only in passing in the novel, but was of critical importance. Isabella's background. The book mentioned that the reason Isabella was able to take control of Rossi Enterprises at such a young age was that her parents had died in an accident when she was very young, and she had an older brother who was always abroad and almost never seen. Her biological brother. This brother was the true, first-in-line heir to Rossi Enterprises. Isabella was merely a proxy, and that so-called accident was full of suspicious circumstances. Ethan's heart began to race. He had a bold, almost insane plan. What if he could find Isabella's mysterious brother and tell him that his parents' death was not an accident? What if he could prove that Isabella had been secretly suppressing and even monitoring her brother to seize power? Then, Isabella would be too busy dealing with her own problems to bother with a small fry like him. The plan was incredibly risky. If he failed, he would die without a doubt. But the potential reward was just as immense. This was his only chance to break free from Isabella and win his freedom. "Let's do it." A crazy light glinted in Ethan's eyes. He took out his phone and began searching for any news about Rossi Enterprises, about the car crash that killed Isabella's parents. However, the information online was scarce. It had clearly been scrubbed. "Looks like I'll have to try another way." Ethan's gaze turned towards the city center, to the Ethelberg Central Library, and to the archives of the last 20 years of newspapers. The next day, Ethan did the unthinkable and asked Isabella for a day off. His excuse was that he had caught a cold from the riverside wind last night. Isabella didn't ask any questions and coldly approved his request. Ethan wasted no time and took a taxi to the library. He dove into the archives, frantically poring over old newspapers from over a decade ago. Time ticked by. Just as he was about to pass out from the smell of musty ink, he found it. In the corner of a decade-old issue of the Ethelberg Evening Post, he found a short article about the car crash. The content of the report was nothing special. but the black and white photo that accompanied it made Ethan's pupils shrink violently. The photo showed the chaotic scene of the crash, and among the crowd behind the police tape, he saw a familiar figure, a young man in a suit, his face carrying a grimness that didn't match his age. Although the photo was blurry and many years had passed, Ethan recognized him at once. That man was the father of the protagonist, Damian Sterling, the then chairman of Apex Consolidated. Preston Sterling, a shocking secret, one not even mentioned by the original author, had just unfolded before him. The death of Isabella's parents was connected to the Sterling family. This world was far more complex and dangerous than he had ever imagined. The hand holding the newspaper was trembling uncontrollably. He felt as if he had just stumbled upon a truth that could shatter everything. Preston Sterling. The man in the photo was Damian Sterling's father, Preston Sterling. This discovery hit him like a lightning bolt, leaving him completely stunned. In the original novel, the feud between the Rossi and Sterling families was portrayed as a simple business rivalry, with Isabella having a one-sided, obsessive fixation on Damian. But now, it seemed there was a deep-seated blood feud hiding beneath the surface. Isabella's psychosis, Damian's arrogance, it all suddenly made sense. This wasn't a corporate battle. It was a generational war between two families. Warning, warning. Host has touched upon the world's core causality. Danger level is incalculable. System is approaching overload. BZZ. Crackle. The system's alarm in his head dissolved into a burst of static and then fell silent. Damn it. Useless at the worst possible moment. Ethan muttered, but he had no time to deal with the defunct system. His hand holding the newspaper was shaking, not from fear, but from an unprecedented excitement. His original plan was just to escape Isabella, to flee Ethelberg. But now, he held a bomb powerful enough to obliterate the city's entire elite circle. Run? Why run? He suddenly realized he had been thinking about it all wrong from the start. In a world full of psychos and overflowing with titans of industry, hiding and running would only get him crushed like an ant. The only way to survive, and maybe even thrive, was to flip the whole damn table. He had to muddy the waters, to throw the high-end mighty power players into a self-destructive spiral. Only then would a small fish like him have a chance to find a path to survival in the chaos. A wild plan began to form in his mind. He kept his composure, calmly placed the newspaper back where he found it, and then took out his phone. He took a dozen high-resolution photos of the article and the blurry picture from every possible angle. Once he was done, he left the library as if nothing had happened. He didn't go home or back to the office. Instead, he headed to the city's sprawling, chaotic electronics market. He paid a few $100s in cash for a cheap burner phone and an unregistered SIM card. Then he found a seedy internet cafe and rented a private booth. Using the public network, he anonymously sent the photos from his phone to one of Ethelberg's, and indeed the nation's, most famous investigative journalists, Marcus Thorne. Thorne was known for digging up dirt on the rich and powerful, earning him the nickname the oligarch's gravedigger. Giving this bombshell to him was the perfect move. For the email subject, Ethan wrote just 5 words: Rossi. Sterling. A blood feud. He left the body of the email blank, attaching only the dozen photos. Click. Send. After that, Ethan snapped the SIM card in half, went to the restroom, and disassembled the burner phone, tossing the parts into different trash cans. He walked out of the internet cafe, looked up at the gray sky, and let out a long breath. The fuse had been lit. Now, all he had to do was wait for the fireworks. He was in such a good mood that he even bought himself a milkshake on the way home. But just as he was about to enter his apartment complex, his regular phone vibrated in his pocket. It was an unknown number. Ethan frowned, a sense of foreboding creeping over him. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Hello. The other end was silent, except for the faint, rhythmic clicking of high heels on pavement. Ethan's heart dropped. Did you have fun? The voice that finally came through was Isabella's, cold and devoid of any emotion. While you're lying about being sick, then running off to the library and some grimy internet cafe. The color drained from Ethan's face. He whipped his head around. There, parked in the shadows at the entrance of his complex, was the all-too-familiar red Ferrari. Leaning against the car door, one hand in her pocket, the other holding her phone, was Isabella, watching him with a chilling gaze. The look in her eyes was one you'd give a dead man. Outside the villa complex, the main road was suddenly packed with media vans. Countless reporters, like sharks that had smelled blood, were swarming the security gates with cameras and microphones. Marcus Thorne had moved even faster than she'd anticipated. That photo was likely all over Ethelberg by now. You knew, didn't you? Isabella's voice had returned to its usual icy tone. Yes, Julian replied softly. I've been investigating for years. I just never expected it to be revealed like this. He paused, then continued. Isabella, what happened back then is complicated. You can't handle this alone. Send me your address. I'm coming to you. We need to talk. After hanging up, Isabella stood motionless for a long time. For the first time, her face showed a hint of confusion and vulnerability. A crack had appeared in the indestructible queen's armor. Ethan saw it all, his mind reeling. Isabella's brother? The mysterious character who was only a footnote in the original novel actually existed, and he was back. This game was getting more and more chaotic. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Isabella took a deep breath and opened the door. Standing on her doorstep was a man in a beige trench coat and gold-rimmed glasses. He was handsome, with a refined, scholarly air that was the complete opposite of Isabella's aggressive presence. But the resemblance in their eyes and brow was undeniable. This was Julian Rossi. Julian stepped inside, his gaze immediately finding his sister. His eyes were filled with pain and regret. Isabella, you've had it hard all these years. That simple sentence shattered the wall of ice Isabella had built around herself for over a decade. Her eyes instantly turned red, but she stubbornly turned her head away. Who asked you to come back? Wasn't it nice abroad? No, Julian said, shaking his head as he took off his coat, revealing a crisp white shirt. Nowhere is good without you. Only then did his gaze fall on Ethan, who was trying to make himself invisible in a corner of the living room. Julian's eyes were gentle, yet they seemed to see right through a person. And who is this? He's Ethan Cole, my man, Isabella answered first, her tone possessive and absolute. Oh, Julian pushed his glasses up, looking Ethan over with interest. Hello, I'm Julian Rossi, Isabella's brother. Mr. Rossi, a pleasure, Ethan stammered, not knowing what to do with his hands. He felt completely exposed under this man's gaze. Julian smiled, then turned his attention back to his sister, pulling her down to sit on the sofa. Isabella, you suspected Preston Sterling for a long time, didn't you? Isabella nodded silently. Then why didn't you tell me? Julian's voice held a note of reprimand. What good would it have done? Isabella laughed self-deprecatingly. So you could come back from abroad and get yourself killed? Do you have any idea what I've been through for the past decade? I spent 10 years clawing Rossi Enterprises back from those vultures who would eat a person alive. I spent 10 years earning myself the right to stand here on equal footing with the Sterling family and everyone else in this city. Everything I've done was so that one day I could avenge our parents with my own hands. Her voice grew louder, her eyes burning with a furious hatred. Julian listened quietly, the pain in his eyes deepening. Damian Sterling? Julian's brow furrowed slightly. He stood and walked to the window, his expression instantly turning cold as he looked at the black Bentley surrounded by media vans. He got here fast. Isabella also stood up, her face a mask of frost, the hatred in her eyes so intense it was almost tangible. Brother, you stay here. I'll go deal with him. No, Julian stopped her. I'm going with you. He turned his head and glanced at the pale, terrified Ethan. Mr. Cole, he said gently, I'm afraid we'll need you to come with us as well. Ethan was dumbfounded. Wait, when titans clash, why are you dragging a mortal like me along? As cannon fodder? Brother, Isabella started to object. I know. Julian cut her off, giving Ethan a meaningful look. After all, Mr. Cole started this whole show. It can't reach its climax without the main character, can it? Ethan's heart went cold. He understood. Julian didn't trust him. He was tying him to this sinking ship, leaving him with no escape. These two siblings, one playing good cop, the other bad cop, were both terrifying. At the villa's entrance, Isabella, Julian, and Ethan emerged together. Instantly, a blinding sea of camera flashes erupted. The reporters went wild, shoving microphones and cameras forward. Ms. Rossi, are the online rumors about your parents' car crash true? Mr. Rossi, are you Julian Rossi, the eldest son? When did you return to the country? Mr. Sterling, do you have any comment on your father's presence at the scene of the Rossi family car crash? Damian stood in front of his car, his face dark as a storm cloud. He ignored the reporters, his blade-like gaze fixed on the Rossi siblings, before finally landing on Ethan behind them. The look in his eyes was murderous. Isabella, this was your doing, Damian stated, not a question. So what if it was? Isabella sneered, not backing down an inch. Damian, the murder of a parent is a feud that cannot be reconciled. From this day forward, between the Rossi and Sterling families, There will be no peace until one of us is destroyed. You think you can take us on? Damien's face twisted into a contemptuous smirk. A woman who only knows how to scheme, and a coward who spent a decade hiding abroad. Who are you calling coward? Before Julian could speak, Isabella exploded with rage. Her brother was her last vulnerability, and she wouldn't allow anyone to tarnish his name. Just as a fight was about to break out, Julian raised a hand, stopping his impulsive sister. He took a step forward, a gentle smile still on his face. Mr. Sterling, words won't solve anything. I have a gift for you. He reached in his pocket, pulled out a flash drive, and tossed it to Damien. On there is evidence of every corporate crime your father, Preston Sterling, has committed over the years, including but not limited to bribery, money laundering, and murder for hire. Damien's pupils contracted violently. He clutched the flash drive, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. You think you can bring down the Sterling family with this? Of course not, Julian smiled, which is why I sent a copy of that drive to the SEC and the FBI an hour ago. Damien, for the Sterling family, the game is over. Boom! Damien's mind went blank. He knew Julian was telling the truth. This man, who appeared so gentle, didn't make a move until it was the final, fatal blow. He had lost, utterly and completely. Ayard! Damien suddenly roared like a cornered beast. His eyes bloodshot, he pulled a dagger from his coat and charged madly at Isabella, who was closest to him. I'll kill you. Watch out. Julian and Ethan shouted at the same time. It all happened in a flash. The cold glint of the dagger was about to plunge into Isabella's heart. At that critical moment, Ethan didn't know where he got the courage, but acting on pure instinct, he lunged forward, using his own body as a shield in front of Isabella. Schlick! The sound of the blade sinking into flesh was sickeningly clear. Warm blood instantly stained the front of his shirt. A searing pain consumed his body. Ethan's vision went black, and he lost consciousness. He asked in a hoarse voice. Yes. Julian nodded, handing him a glass of warm water. You were lucky. The blade missed your heart by an inch. The doctor said you'll be fine after some rest. Ethan took a sip of water, wetting his dry lips, before remembering the most important question. What about Damien? He was subdued on the spot. He should be in a holding cell by now, awaiting a long list of charges, Julian said coolly. The Sterling family is finished. Hearing this, Ethan let out a long sigh of relief. The two biggest mountains weighing on his soul had finally been moved. Where's Isabella? He asked next. At the mention of his sister, a wry, helpless smile appeared on Julian's face. She stayed by your side for 3 days and nights. I just convinced her to go home and rest. Mr. Cole, Julian said, looking at him with a complicated expression. I'm very curious. Why did you take that knife for her? Ethan was silent. He couldn't explain it himself. Maybe it was a survival instinct. After all, if Isabella died, he, the insider, wouldn't live long either. Or maybe, after spending these last few days with her, he had developed a sliver of sympathy for the queen who was so cold on the outside, but just as lonely on the inside. A sympathy he was reluctant to admit, even to himself. Maybe it's because she pays well, Ethan said with a weak smile, making a joke. Julian chuckled at that and didn't press further. By the way, Julian said, as if remembering something. He took a file from his bag and handed it to Ethan. These are the transfer papers for your sister. I've already arranged for her to be moved to the best rehabilitation center in Switzerland next week for treatment. All expenses will be covered by the Rossi family. Ethan stared at the file, his eyes suddenly turning red. His greatest wish since transmigrating into this world was to get his sister the care she needed. Now, that wish was finally coming true. Thank you. 1,000 words were ultimately condensed into just one. We're the ones who should be thanking you, Julian said earnestly. 1 month later, Ethan was discharged from the hospital. The first thing he did was submit his resignation letter. In Isabella's office. You're leaving? Isabella frowned, looking at the letter on her desk. Yes. Ethan nodded, his expression calm. This world is too dangerous. I think finding a small, quiet place to live out the rest of my life is more my style. I'll give you money, Isabella said. Enough for you and your sister to live comfortably for the rest of your lives. I know. Ethan smiled. But what I want isn't money. What he wanted was freedom. The freedom to escape all of this and return to a normal life. Isabella was silent. She looked at the man before her. He still had that same flippant demeanor, but his eyes held a new firmness and composure that wasn't there when they first met. He was no longer a little mouse to be toyed with. He was an eagle, about to break free from its cage and soar into the sky. I understand, Isabella finally nodded after a long pause. She opened a drawer and placed two items on the desk. One was an unregistered black card with no credit limit. The other was Arasi Enterprises stock transfer agreement. The name of the beneficiary on the agreement was, shockingly, Ethan Cole. One is so you'll have no worries. The other, Isabella looked at him, her gaze intense, is so that when you're tired of flying, you'll always have a home to come back to. Ethan stared at the stock agreement, stunned. He never expected her to give him this. This went far beyond simple gratitude. Why? He asked, confused. Isabella didn't answer. She stood up, walked over to him, and for the first time, gave him a gentle hug, one that held no lust or calculation. Ethan, she whispered in his ear, thank you for showing me that there really is someone in this world who would throw themselves in front of me without a second thought. Live well, and then, with your story, live freely. Ethan's body was frozen. After a long moment, he slowly raised his hands and gently returned her embrace.